All right, so tonight I'm working on a project where we have a hissing toilet and the valve in top of here, the seal is worn out and it's allowing the water to continue to go into the drain, overflow drain right here. And if you've gotten a high water bill and you're trying to figure out is it related to the toilet, if you're hearing some hissing coming from here, more than likely it's this toilet valve. The whole thing needs to be replaced. These are, I would say, these are older style. They're not 100% the newest styles available, but the oldest style, of course, has got that big float coming over here to the side. These are a little bit older style, and I'll show you the one I'm going to replace this with. I believe this probably came with the house, with the toilet once they were installed. But I've already checked the gasket inside here, and the gasket is not sealing. I saw water overflowing into the overflow tube, and that is why it needs to be replaced. So a couple of things I'm going to show you. The one I'm going to replace it with is this Korky Pro Grade 528 Pro. The box is a little bit torn up there, but these are some of the pieces that are going to come with that unit. You've got the whole valve that's going to come in there. You've got a whole new flapper, and I'm going to put that on just because I'm already in there. And you've got what I call the lock. Once you twist this to the proper height, you put this lock in here. Prevents that from moving. You've got a new nut, a flare nut for the water line. Most of the time you don't need this. Sometimes there's a gasket in there though. If you have to replace it, they at least do give you a gasket. This is for a specific type of overflow. I don't need that one. I've already attached the tube. I'll show you that. And then you've got a gauge. This one actually has an adjustable water level, so water flow. So you can adjust that with this gauge. We'll get into that in a little more detail. And then they've got the nut that attaches the valve to the toilet. One thing to keep in mind, and I'll try to explain that as I'm doing it, they want this opened or this flared side going up. It even says it on there, this side up. So some people would think go to the flat side of the toilet. They actually want this beveled side going towards the toilet. They've already got that ring on there for you. So you're going to get a new gasket here. And this is the piece. Let me show you there. There is where that is adjustable. That's where that gauge will come in, if I could show you that. So this actually rotates to adjust water flow. So depending on how fast you want it to refill, you can make those adjustments. This is the tube that comes with it, and this is the style of piece that I'm going to use. It's a metal clip that comes with the kit to send that water into the overflow. It's kind of, they want you to put that over the metal. I like to put it this through the metal, and I can cut this to length when I get this set up, and we'll do that as we go forward. I'll show you how I do that. Tools you're going to need. Again, you may not want to do it exactly like I do, but I'll show you as we go why I'm using this specific tools. This tool right here is once that we've got this line where we want it right here, I like to crimp that down just a little bit, just so it's not going to move. And this right here I'm going to use to actually snip this zip tie. I'm going to put a zip tie even after I've crimped it, just to make sure this thing's not going back and forth. Scissors to cut that hose once we figure out where we're going to get it. And you're going to need a pair of channel locks depending on what kind of fitting you've got on your old unit and how to remove that. All right, and then the other things I'm going to recommend you do is get you some type of a, you can use a waste can or some kind of bucket, because after you've shut the water off, flush the toilet, and gotten as much out of that rear tank as you can, you're going to need something to collect the rest of the water as soon as you pull the valve out. Another thing I recommend, get you some type of plastic bag with some paper towels or something in there, and any of the wet parts that you pull out of the old valve, you can throw in this bag so they're just not getting stuff all over your floor. Keep in mind, I also recommend certainly clean your toilet 100% inside and out before you perform this. And if you don't, please do wash your hands after you're done with this operation. It can get a little dirty and can get a little wet doing all those things. So I just like to have a clean toilet as best I can, especially the inside and outside of the toilet before I'm going to get in there and do this kind of work. All right, so we're going to go on to the next step, and I'll have you set up for the next step. All right, on to the next step. So make sure at this point you've turned your water off and that you flushed your toilet to empty as much out of your tank as you can. I've already done that on mine, but just reminding you before you get to this step, you want to empty as much of that water out of the tank as you can, and you want to make sure that water's off, because if you take this line off, it's pressurized and water is going everywhere. So I've already loosened mine a little bit, but this right here is where it's attached to that valve. So you want to take that loose, and I like to take the line all the way off. And right here, I like to take this line all the way off here. You're going to use your channel lock pliers, and you're going to turn this nut until you get this all the way off. So mine's loose now. Take this off, and we're going to push that down a little bit and set this out of the way, because it just makes it a little bit easier for us to finish this operation like this. And just set that down. You want to have an old towel or something right here so you're not having to get water all over your floor. So mine has a plastic nut under here. Don't know if you could see that, but there's a plastic nut holding the bottom of the valve in place. So this is where you're going to want to loosen that a little bit. Use your channel lock pliers. Loosen that. And then you're going to want to put your bucket under there before you take this nut all the way off, because the residual water still in that tank is about to leak down. Normally that thing's about finger tight, but some plumbers like to tighten that up a little bit more, so you may still need to use your pliers. This is where your tank to collect the rest of that water is going to be important. So the closest you can get it, take this nut off here, and you're going to get water running out of there. And just let the nut drop down into that bucket. Don't worry about, you're going to throw that one out anyways. All right, and then from inside the tank, pull that valve up. And that's going to let the remaining water drain out of there. All right, and let it just kind of continue. That's another reason why you want that old towel underneath there, because if you miss any of that water, it's not going to land onto your floor, ruin your floors or anything. It's just going to land on that towel. All right, and then if you want to, at that time, you could put a paper towel in there and let that continue to stop, let that drip, or let it stop dripping once you put that paper towel in there. I think I've got it enough where the towel I have on the floor will correct the remaining. So I'm going to leave that valve on the top, and then I'll show you kind of what we look like now. So here we are at the top here, and I've got the valve out. Here's the old valve. That's the only thing holding it in, other than you may have a drain line that is sitting on this overflow right here. So I have taken that completely loose, and this piece is now going to go in the trash, and then we'll move on to the next step. Before we do that, though, I'll show you. I'm going to take the old flapper off. So here we are, and see if I can maybe get you a little bit more light in there. All right, see, so there's the old flapper, and we're going to take that off, again, showing you there's the old valve. We've already taken that out. So this flapper style right here has just got two clips on the sides. We're not replacing this tube, so be very careful, don't break that tube. So it's also connected by a chain right here on the flush handle. So take that chain off, just like that, and then unsnap the other side of that flapper there, and you're going to throw this piece out too. All right. So that is everything we're going to remove for this example, and then I'm going to get on the next step, which is installing the new flush valve for you. All right, here at the next step, I'm going to show you something outside of the toilet on the valve that's hard to see once this is down in the toilet. But this little piece right here is letting you know how many notches you are up to be level in the tank properly. That clip I showed you at the beginning of the video is showing you how you lock that in place. And you're supposed to push this up in there and have it snap in these other two that are exposed so it cannot rotate down lower. Now, why that's important and why I showed you that now is, like I said, once I put this in here, You can check this and try to get it exactly right before you put it down in here. I advise to wait to lock it in with this tab though until you know your water levels are correct. But in the instructions, they tell you there's a line on here called the center line. And that center line is supposed to be 1 inch above the overflow tube. Another way to look at it is there is an assembly mark at the bottom of this plastic right here. That should be level with the overflow tube. And another thing you were trying to check before you go any further is they want this fill line as straight as it can be to that overflow tube. So keep that in mind when you go underneath to tighten the valve in place. So whenever you're doing that, you want to kind of turn this to have that as straight of a line as you can going right into that overflow tube. And that's where this comes in, how I mentioned I have my tube going through there, and I will eventually cut the excess tube once I won't do that though until this is completely bolted in. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it right here, and I will do this clip at a later step and show you why we waited for that. So I may move this out of my way for a second, and I'm going to do the flapper valve first. So the flapper valve is pretty simple. See if I can put that on. So this one's full rubber. It doesn't snap on. This one actually just kind of goes over the edges of that the old overflow tube there. So it's a little bit more flexible, easier to install. So there we go, we're on there. And again, if you see, those are solid holes. Those are not clips on this one. So we put that on, and then I've already adjusted my chain, and you're gonna connect that back to the flush handle here. So for mine, I think I took about 6 lengths of the chain out. And what I kind of go for is you want to be able to apply light pressure and all slack be gone out of that chain. If you can see that on the video there, all that slack is pretty much gone, just a light touch of the handle there. So the thing you're trying to avoid too is that you raise this so high and it doesn't open the flap and the top of your handle is hitting the tank. So that's kind of why you want to have a little bit of slack here, but not a whole lot of slack. So if you're comfortable with that, then go forward with it just exactly like how I did there. But I would say give yourself a link or two to kind of hang down and let the rest of that slack be pulled out. And I shouldn't be hitting the top of my tank when I'm at full flush, but you can see how much the flapper is even opening, and it will allow that water to flow down in there. All right, also in this step, I'm just going to put this valve in place like this. I'm not going to tighten it yet. I will show you that on the next step because it's too hard to kind of explain how I'm tightening that from this view right here. The other thing, like I said, is we're kind of going to keep in mind where this position needs to be. I would call that, say, the clocking of this valve. So if you keep in mind where the clocking of the valve needs to be, where you have that overflow tube straight, then kind of keep that in your mind. You want to kind of keep that in position, and then you're going to start to tighten the nut from the bottom side, and I will show you that on the next step. All right, we're at the next step, and remember how I told you about the clocking of the valve. So you're going to kind of use, I would say, your right hand, or whichever hand you want to use, hold that clocking position correct inside the tank. You're going to take the nut that they provided, and remember how I said that beveled end needs to go up. Don't make the mistake of the flat end going up. They want the bevel end going up. I assume that's probably for some of the possible imperfections in the porcelain. So they want that bevel end going up. And we're just going to put that on, maintain the clocking position up here at the top with the other hand. And you want to hand tighten this. I kind of get it, what I would say, finger tight, and then I try to go a quarter turn more with my hand if I can. There is a gasket up here, so that gasket should be sealing pretty tight, but the key is you don't want to break the plastic. So if you tighten it too much, you're going to snap that plastic off and you're going to have a leak. So you don't want that. So, all right, so that I'm believing is as tight as we're going to be able to get that. All right, we're going to put that line back on, and this is a flare styled nut on this tube, so I am not going to change anything out on the tube that was on there. The gasket that's in there looks in good shape. They do provide a different one if you think you need to replace that. In my opinion, let's just see kind of, yeah, I don't really want to replace that style because it's a completely different style and I didn't have any leaks in this area. So we're just going to leave this style back on there because I couldn't get this one on anyways, and it's a flared nut on this other side. So we're not going to damage any of that trying to put that other gasket on. So what I would do here is go ahead and reinstall down here in the valve. And you may have to push it back down in there and then get this lined up and tighten that end up. All right, and so the same thing here. This should be finger tight on this side, and then you're going to use your pliers down on this side. So get that hand tight, and then you're going to do at least a quarter turn with your pliers, and then I will finish that up, and then we'll start back off on the next step. All right, in this step, we've already tightened everything down on the bottom. We've already got the valve set, and I've already got my height set at the recommended setting, but we may have to adjust that still once we fill this tank back up with water. So for right now, I'm just going to leave it where it's at, and I'm moving on to the step where I do the overflow tube. Now for mine, like I said, they typically like you to put this inside this tubing, but for me, it seems to like not go down in this area far enough, and sometimes water will splash out this way. So I like to go just a little bit further, but you don't want to go so deep down into this tube. So keep that in mind. Mine's kind of stopping right where the bend is, and I like to cut it at a 45-degree angle so no water splash is going to go beyond this drain tube. So remember our clocking though. We kept our clocking straight for this piece to be without any resistance, and also you got to kind of watch to make sure that this tube doesn't have any kinks or bends in it. So I'm going to go ahead and put mine on, and I've got my placement set, and remember, I'm going to crimp this down just a little bit too once we put it on there. So then I like to push it down on there, and I'm double checking that I don't have any kinks or anything in the hose. And then like I mentioned, my 45-degree is kind of going just to the very top of this. The hose is not going down in there very deep though. So those pliers I mentioned earlier, we're not going to squeeze it too hard, but we're going to do a little bit of a squeeze right here just to make sure this is not coming off of here. So the hose doesn't back out of there. And sometimes I like to squeeze these other two tabs right here, and then that just holds it in place. And then we're going to put that one zip tie, I've already got it there ready. I'm going to put that one zip tie between those two pieces of metal. I don't know if you can see that there. And that's just going to make sure that this thing doesn't blow out of this thing, depending on how much pressure. And these are UV rated outdoor zip ties. Normal zip tie may work, but I like using the UV rated. This is where those clips are coming, so you can cut the tab off of that. And that's how I finish out the hose there. We are tight now, and I'm ready to turn the water back on, but I'm not going to put this tab back on yet in case we have to raise or lower this. So what we're looking for, once we turn the water on, we're looking for that water to stop somewhere below this overflow tube. We're also looking to see if we've got water filling in the bowl itself about the same height it was before we worked on any of this. And you kind of want to see this should be stopping around where it was before. Mine actually has a line where it should stop here on the overflow tube, and it should stop about the same time where it was in the bowl. That water adjustment I was showing you earlier is right here on the top, so you can change your flow by how much water you want to enter in or to slow down that flow. And they give you this adjustment key, and I'll show you that real quick while we're here. So they've got like 1, 2, 3, all the way to 8, I believe. And the way that that works, you're supposed to turn this all the way open, and then you tighten down or you close it until that adjustment key shows the number of adjustments you're wanting. So if I was wanting adjustment 1, open it all the way up, close it down, and then that would be adjustment 1, and then you would rotate this key, so on and so forth. And again, that's just very specific on this valve. Not all valves have that adjustability, but this one does, so we're going to work with that here in just a minute. All right, we're ready to turn the water back on. One thing I want to mention is don't move that towel out of the way just yet. Leave the towel down there in case you've got a leak or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and turn mine on. And remember, we've got this valve is full, open, so we can close that back down. You see how I'm adjusting the water pressure? And I'm probably going to put that on a very low setting because that is pretty wide open there. So, but see, I was telling you about some of that splash here, if you can see that. So that's why I kind of cut mine at a little bit of that 45-degree angle, because it is pretty high pressure coming out of there. You could also close your quarter turn valve a little bit to reduce that pressure so it doesn't have to be all the way wide open there. But we're going to let this thing fill up. We're going to kind of see where it stops. And then we may take a look, make sure everything's adjusted properly. But yeah, you can see how we can definitely reduce pressure here. So we're looking on my tank to be somewhere right within where this sticker is that was on the original toilet valve. If we're a little bit higher than that, you know, we can adjust this down. And remember that white clip I was telling you about, that's where this comes in, and this thing is adjustable up and down. So we'll still be able to make those adjustments if we're not accurate on where we're at currently. All right, you can see that it went up just almost overflowing there. So we're still too high. We're going to have to drop this down. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn the water off on the toilet. And I'm going to flush the toilet to get that to go back down. All right, right here we are finally adjusted and we are refilling the tank again. I had to go down, just like I mentioned, one more on this valve. And mine is just a little bit under that line right there. So they had mentioned, you know, you want about an inch. We could cut the top of that tube down, but I'm not going to go at that point right now to do that. I double checked here that I don't have any kinks in this line, and I have adjusted my valve to number 1 on the key there. So if you have this same style, I put the number 1 in there and closed it off. So if you could see on mine, I've got it to that same line that was on the original tank there. And then I've already checked inside the bowl, and we are filled back up into the bowl as we normally should be. At the beginning of the video, I showed you down in here those little notches that you're going to have to put that white key in. It's time to put that in now, but before I do, I'm going to go ahead and turn this water off. I'm going to flush and get some of that water to go back down so I can reach down in there and see that a little bit better. I'm going to try to get as much as I can out of that area. My notches are lined up on this side of my valve. So you want to try to push this up as high as it'll go until those 2 notches will snap in place. It's going to be a little bit difficult probably for me to do that on camera because I've got this arm in my way and everything. But I'm going to finish that up off camera. But to give you that idea, those notches I showed you at the beginning, you're going to have to slide this up inside there, and that has to kind of push in there almost like 2 little Lego pieces. And then that kind of snaps in so it will not allow this to rotate anymore. So that's to kind of help you once you've got it adjusted, that locks it in place. All right, that is the completion on how you're going to change a toilet valve. I am by no means a plumber, so I may have done some things differently, or a plumber may mention that I did some things wrong. I am a homeowner for over 20 years, so this is kind of how I've had to replace them, and I'm always open to learn new things. Hopefully this information was useful or helpful for you. And if it was, please subscribe and share. And that's to the point.